This is Toby Capwell, curator, author, historical advisor, and all-round expert on historical arms and armour. And I'm your host, Dave Jewett. Today, Toby and I will be taking a trip through 15th century Bohemia to break down some of the weapons and armour of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
In my job, I'm always dealing with myths and misconceptions. And one of the prevailing misconceptions is that knights in armor and gunpowder weapons and the wielders of gunpowder weapons are two like elemental, diametrically opposed forces. When in reality, knights were the first ones to see the virtues of gunpowder weapons. And in this period, they're really nailing it there.
Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is absolutely massive, so we'll have another episode in the game coming very soon, as well as episodes on Monster Hunter Wilds and the grimdark universes of Warhammer. In fact, you can watch our next Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 episode on our Patreon right now. We're breaking down the sieges, exploring Kuttenberg, talking about the legendary Jan Žižka, and so much more.
You think so, huh?
Either way, we hope you enjoy this episode. Be sure to like the video if you do. And now I'll throw it over to Toby.
What are you after here?
Love the bright colors, that really bold red. Medieval types are, now going blue in the face, going on about how they're sick of seeing the Middle Ages covered in mud and just being washed out in brown and gray. That's the typical treatment in television and film. So refreshing to see some really bold color here in the natural landscape. It's really bright, it's really bold, but also still natural. None of these colors look like modern or artificial. Well, you can see that his armor is hammer finished, and they're immediately telling you he's of a slightly lower status. He's got good metal armor, but it hasn't had the finest grinding and polishing treatments. You can still see hammer marks from it. And that's one really good indicator of where he belongs in the social hierarchy.
So what is each piece? What's the sort of makeup of this set? Because this is just the set that you start the game with.
He's wearing, essentially what you're seeing here is one of the first stages that full plate armor achieved early in its final development. This is the period when, like from the 1380s, it became possible to make big enough pieces of iron and steel to make one-piece breast and soon back plates. When before this, in the early 14th century, all they could ever make really were 2-kilogram pieces of iron or steel. But he has sabatons, he's got articulated plates for his feet, he's got complete plate leg armor with articulated paulanes, the knee joints, with the side wings there that are there to protect the vulnerable tendons in the back of the knee. Moving up, he's got, plate body armor covered in leather or textile, with a solid one-piece breastplate under there. He's also almost certainly wearing a full shirt of mail underneath all of that. Oh, yeah, they've given him a one-piece backplate already. Well, that's pretty advanced for the early 15th century. And then complete defenses for the arms. Interestingly, the upper and lower arms are still an older form here. So he's wearing arm defenses that are maybe a generation old when he's wearing them in the early 15th century. They probably date from the late 14th century. So he's got some slightly old-fashioned stuff that he's wearing, which is totally, absolutely authentic. Technology has that point when it's brand new. It always has its point of origin when it's high tech, but then all pieces of technology have a working lifetime. And, my car's 10 years old. I admit it. And I have no desire to buy another one. Armor can have a working lifetime of 50 or 100 years. I've seen examples in 16th century sources of low-ranking common soldiers wearing helmets that are over 100 years old. Grandpa's helmet is better than no helmet. And so that's another really nice indicator of where this guy is. he's wearing some second or third hand gear. Still works, still does the job, and he can still be considered a well-equipped bodyguard. He's also wearing a war hat. There's something kind of endlessly universal in a helmet that just covers the head with a brim and leaves the face open. How many helmets like that can you think of from like 3,000 years of human history? We always come back to, hats, basically. First World War helmets look a lot like 15th century war hats, look a lot like ancient Boeotian helmets. A peak or a brim, leaving the face open so you can breathe and see. The brim on a hat like that gives you really amazing protection for your face. If you imagine blades coming in, that might be a bit scary, but that brim will stop it before it gets to you. And if you're trying to strike a balance between protection, being able to see, breathe, and communicate, a helmet with a brim like that almost can't be beaten, and they keep coming back.
Just for your context, this game was never supposed to be seen from a third-person perspective. I've installed I've installed a camera mod to allow us to see characters in motion, but they've still animated it really very well. So this is basically armor that I've scavenged from other bandits.
Hey, that's a pretty nice brigandine.
Yeah, this is it fresh and new, so I've had it repaired, and as you take damage or travel, it'll get muddier, bloodier, rustier, become torn.
Yeah, I mean, already he's got a decent amount of gear that's worth having.
Well, I've taken what you've said to heart. If I can afford any piece of armor, the helmet.
Helmet, body armor, then worry about the rest. And you're right to prioritize the upper body over the legs. There's a lot of evidence for soldiers when they're fighting on foot. They have almost complete armor like a knight, except nothing on their legs. They just don't wear the leg armor. If you're fighting in a block of men, the mobility, the ability to run up and down hills and things and just not have your legs encased and encumbered, it's an important one.
Well, weight is a consideration in the game as well. So if you're fighting in light armor, your stamina will decrease slower. If you're head to toe in plate, then your stamina will decrease quicker, meaning that you won't be able to deliver as many strikes or stay in the fight as long.
But you're harder to hurt.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off.
So this next armor, which features some fighting as well, this is about maybe 40% through the game. You've earned some more money, maybe taken down a wealthier enemy, taken his armor. So this is armor from the mid-game.
Yeah, that's a big upgrade. I do really wish we could see some mail hanging down around his hips. Can we see? Is that, he has got a mail. He's got mail coming down.
Yeah, he's got mail and then there's an undergarment below that.
Yeah, I guess they want you to see everything that he's wearing or something. I wish we weren't seeing quite as much quilted skirt hanging down there. It kind of...
I mean, that could be a critique of my fashion. There are shorter.
But like, where he's wearing the upper leg armor, but still no greaves, no lower legs. That's nice. Also, these distinctive styles of late 14th century bassinet, where you've got this big nasal. It's almost like partway between a nasal and an actual visor, where you can see with a helmet design like that, how tricky it is to balance the necessary protection of the face. It doesn't matter how much fabulous armor you've got. If someone stabs you through the face, game over. But you need to be able to see, you need to be able to breathe, you usually need to be able to communicate. So that careful balance, how much of the face do we cover in what exact way, and yet retain a decent visibility and ventilation. Putting a bar straight down the middle of your face is a super old idea, and it might not seem like very much, but you think of most blades being struck are coming in at some kind of angle. So again, having that bar there is a lot better than not having it there. And here they've made the nasal about as big as it can be before it turns into a visor, but very distinctive of the late 14th century. So, his gear here is still like maybe a generation old or something, but that's fine. All that gear would still be in play.
I've taken the helmet and the mail hood off here because there's the detail of the metal V.
Yeah.
And I think you've told me about this before, and that was designed to deflect blows away from the neck and face.
Yes, that's a typical stop rib, very characteristic of the late 14th and early 15th centuries. You've got this fabulous smooth steel plate protecting your vitals. And another of the really important functions that a breastplate has is as a glancing surface. It can absorb and hopefully protect you against a direct hit. But most hits aren't direct. They come in at a bit of an angle and then they just skate off. That's often good, sometimes it's not. If the weapon comes in and then glances up into your throat, that's bad. One common mistake that a lot of modern armor people make is that they fasten the shoulder plates down, at the top, they fasten them too far out on the shoulder, and he's got this problem as well. You see how the shoulder plate is kind of sagging off of his shoulder? It really should be right up on there. I want to jump into the game and move his points up towards the straps, the neck straps on his cuirass, the shoulder straps on his cuirass there. I want that whole shoulder plate to move in and sit on his actual shoulder. That sort of saggy shoulder syndrome you see a lot on modern living history people and things. Tighten up your shoulders.
If you're enjoying this Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 deep dive, there's an even deeper edition over on our Patreon. Not only that, but there is also an entire second episode breaking down the world, characters, and massive moments of KCD2 that you can watch right now. By becoming a patron, you not only help support the work we do here, but you'll also be able to watch all of our previous extended episodes and each and every future episode 1 week early. Each patron directly supports the work we're doing here at EXP. But whether you join our Patreon, subscribe to us here on YouTube, we just want to say thank you for your support, and now I'll get back to the video.
So here I am fighting with a short sword and a shield.
Yeah, I mean, fighting multiple attackers is always hard. And no matter how skilled you are, if there's a team of people attacking you and they know what they're doing, you're in real trouble. And that's one of the main places where armor really comes in. Certainly in a skirmish or a battle, you're fighting one or two people, someone else comes in and hits you, and no power on earth could stop them. That's when your armor is really important. Protecting you against the incidental contact or the secondary, tertiary contacts. You trip and fall over something and you get back up, and then someone's, winding up to hit somebody else and hits you on the wind up. All that incidental contact is one of the places where armor really proves itself.
It definitely plays on that in the game. Like the more armor you have, the more enemies at once you can take on confidently. And I found as I became more armored, in later in the clips you will see me fully armored. I ditched the shield in place of a two-handed longsword because I found I was much more. It suited me more being able to deliver damage from a longer range, or just deliver more deadly strikes and have the use of both of my hands. And the shield was sort of secondary because I felt more confident in the armor on my body.
Once the plate armor has developed to a certain point, and it happened very rapidly from the early 15th century, you get to a point pretty quickly when you're wearing the shield, so you don't need to carry it anymore.
I'll hack you up like you deserve. Yeah? Fuck that.
There are guys coming around the sides. You need to be careful about that. Yeah, don't spend too much time on one person. There's 3 other guys there.
You can just hear me getting clonked on the edge of the maze behind me.
Yeah, you've only got really one blow against somebody before you've got to pay attention to his friends.
I found, and I don't know if I'm assuming it's a conscious decision they made during the development of the game. If I remained close to an individual, if everyone else was sort of in my front 180 degrees, they wouldn't be able to strike at me because I'm too close to an ally.
That's when you're fighting several people at once, that's one of the classic things you should try and do is use one of them as a shield. Or take one of them and move them into the way of the others. Constantly be thinking about keeping them between you and the rest of them. Again, the armor helps compensate for that, but still. The throat is always vulnerable. The throat presents one of the most intractable challenges in armor design because, and when you're fighting people in armor, it's always worth keeping that in mind, that in a lot of armor, the throat it can be a weak area. Not always, but it can be, because it's so vulnerable. It's such a vulnerable area. Even a small wound there can cause big problems. And yet, it's so central to your mobility and your awareness. You can't have great mobility and great protection. But the throat is somewhere where you really do need both. So what is the answer to that? And I think neck protection and the history of it is one of the most interesting strands of the story of armor. To what extent can you allow your neck and your head to start to be constrained for the sake of protection? Definitely had an armor upgrade again. Gone are the splinted arms. He's now got solid plates on his arms. He's got a visored helmet now that appears to go down by itself. That's handy. That's actually based on a helmet now in the Philadelphia collection in America. Very distinctive one with a kind of faceted nose.
So you see, I've ditched the shield now as well. But I am carrying a number of weapons. Throughout the game, I'll carry my longsword, a hammer, especially in the late game, maybe a polearm, and a ranged weapon. Is that something knights or armored fighters would do, or would they just have the one weapon on them? Would they have backups?
No, knights carried a series of weapons, and knightly treatises talk about the order in which you should use them and how you use them. They say use each weapon until it breaks or is lost, and then the next one comes out. It goes down basically in order of range. So the longest range one goes first, and then you progressively move down until you're at close quarters.
This is just some poleaxe fighting. This weapon's been, it's still not the most useful weapon. It's obviously good at keeping enemies from at range. But halberds and pole weapons in KCD2 have come a long way from the original game.
Yeah, I hope so, because in my experience, no weapon in armored combat beats the poleaxe. There's just no contest at all.
We saw you fighting with poleaxe.
Yeah, I mean, we train a lot with them, and they're extremely versatile weapon. On balance, against swords and spears, the axe is the weapon to have. So you should feel its advantages in a game like this. The hooking the leg is a nice touch. That's a good technique. You see that a lot in poleaxe technique, early 15th century. I think one of the things that really gives the poleaxe an advantage too is that it doesn't suffer from range limits. It gives you a lot of reach, but up close, there's plenty of techniques for using it close in. Whereas something like a spear, it's great at range, but if somebody gets inside your point, you might as well throw it away because it's not very much use anymore. But the axe doesn't suffer as much from that.
So this is one of the more expensive pieces of armor, late game armor, fancier pieces of armor. A mixture of what the game calls noble and Nuremberg pieces.
But Nuremberg was a famous center of armor production in the 15th century. It was really more famous for, lower cost, lower quality munitions armor made in huge numbers for outfitting, whole armies. So Nuremberg wasn't so famous for high quality gear, although it always did have skilled masters supplying the high aristocracy. But that wasn't normally its main industry. But he's looking pretty good, but he's still got the hammered finish, so he's still not really of a high knightly level here, although he certainly is moving up in the world from where he's been earlier. Oh, he's got a handgun on his back there now.
Yeah, we'll see some of that in action later.
Yeah, that's a nice touch, because one thing that sort of drives me crazy, in my job, I'm always dealing with myths and misconceptions, This subject is just littered with them, and everybody thinks they know a set number of things, and it's all nonsense, right? And one of the prevailing misconceptions is that knights in armor, that chivalric class, and gunpowder weapons and the wielders of gunpowder weapons are two like elemental, diametrically opposed forces. You know, like positive and negative, or high tech and old world, or aristocratic and common. You know, there's this opposition that's always set up, when in reality, knights were the first ones to see the virtues of gunpowder weapons. And in this period, in the early 15th century, we already see drawings, concepts in medieval military manuals for how to give the mounted knight on his armored horse a handgun. They're already thinking, if we could get handguns on the armored cavalry, we'd really be in business here. So this opposition doesn't exist. It didn't exist. The knights were the first people to see the virtues of those weapons, and they're not difficult to see. At this period, handheld firearms have a serious limitation in accuracy. Like they're not accurate at all. And they take a long time to reload, but the energy they deliver to the target is orders of magnitude greater than any other weapon of the time. If you can hit what you're aiming at, you know, the results are not difficult to see. And knights saw them. And, you know, to see basically fully armored man-at-arms or a knight like this, and he's got the handgun, how refreshing is that? I mean, that is light on in the darkness. They're really nailing it there. He blocked with his gauntlet there. Did you see that?
Yeah, it keeps his offhand up.
Yeah, but specifically turning your hand so that your palm isn't, you can still get stabbed in the glove. So when you defend with a gauntlet, it's better to do it this way. And he just did that. That was nice, really nice. And just generally, when you've got gauntlets, there's all sorts of defensive techniques where you're using the armor. Even if you've got a dagger or a weapon, you still can use the armor to protect yourself more actively.
So this is a comparison of the ranged weapons.
Oh.
So starting with a standard bow and its effect on this armored individual who kindly volunteered to be my target dummy.
The sound is really nice here. The sound of the release, of the loose.
You see how many shots it took for him to finally go down. You could hear the arrows bouncing off the chest plate in some places as well. This is a basic crossbow.
Well, the armor does its job. I mean, even if the crossbow punches a hole in the plate, it might not necessarily hurt you inside there. The arrow the bolt has to travel a fair way through the armor to make a substantial injury.
Now, a more powerful crossbow punches through that bit more.
This is a more powerful one because you're spanning it with the.
Was it called? Did you say a goat hoof?
It's called a goat's foot lever or lever. Yeah. It uses basic leverage to increase the pull on the bow. Not a huge amount. I mean, you can't span a super heavy crossbow with a goat's foot lever.
This is the heaviest, most powerful crossbow in the game.
Oh no, with the windlass.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you're using pulley system. Yeah, and then you have to back it off.
But obviously, that means that I can't reload it while moving. Because I have to use my foot.
Right. Yeah, that's why the heavy crossbows like this are better in sieges when there's a wall to hide behind while you reload. Or in the field, of course, crossbowmen often carried big shields, pavisas, which often had braces on the back you could set up like a portable wall to hide behind while you're reloading. This is the principal advantage that a longbow has over a crossbow, of course. They hit about the same. There's not a lot of difference in what the projectile does when it arrives, but the bow, the rate of shooting is much greater. But the crossbow has the advantage that it doesn't take a lifetime of training to shoot one. All right, here we go. What are you gonna light it with?
Just a hot wick.
Oh yeah? How did you heat it up?
That is less expensive.
Yep, that's it. Distance about 3 or 4 feet, you're good.
In game, it's really just used to open up a fight, take down an armored opponent, and then draw your sword, because of the length of time it takes to reload it. It's just not worth going for that second shot.
If it takes one of them out, great. It did its job.
So I tried to include some specific hammer fighting gameplay. Because each type of armor it's got a defense statistic against certain types of strikes, slashing, piercing, blunt. And it's really against, obviously, the armored enemies where the hammer shines.
Hammer fighting like that is not easy, though, because there's not a lot of forgiveness in your distance. Your distance is off by even a little bit, and you just hit with the shaft or you miss. You know, your control and judgment of distance has to be absolutely bang on. But it's sometimes hard to judge the distance exactly in everything. Or sometimes with your visor down, you can easily lose track of where your hands are on the haft of the weapon, and you can be a little bit choked up on it, and the blade can be a bit closer to your leading hand than you realize. It's quite a skill to always know exactly where your hands are.
So this character's called Kubyenka. He has an interesting mixture of armor, but it's the dagger that I wanted to feature him for.
Oh yeah, he's got a Poleaxe knife. Yep, very popular. He's not wearing it as one would wish it, though. These are a real thing, euphemistically referred to in 19th and early 20th century literature as kidney daggers. They are, in fact, phallic knives or daggers that are designed to look like the erect male genitalia. And when properly worn in a courtly setting in the 14th century, they're worn directly over the groin. It's probably perfectly plausible that someone might own a Poleaxe knife, but not possess the necessary swagger and courage to wear it on the appropriate part of your anatomy. So sticking it in the back or whatever. I'm sure I've seen depictions of people wearing Poleaxe knives at the side of the belt or whatever, but really they should be low front and center.
That's where I wear mine. So finally, this was another smaller detail, but nevertheless interesting. The sound that comes from your armor.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And depending on the armor you're wearing, the sound that is generated changes.
Sure.
And it can change how the game plays if you're like sneaking through a camp, or if you're engaged in a bit of skullduggery, sneaking through a city. If you're wearing chain and plates and they're making noise, guards will notice you easier. But would there ever be a need for an armored fighter or a knight to be sneaking around?
Sure.
Yeah.
And you can. I mean, it's any time I've ever worn armor in public for whatever reason, there's always some guy who comes up and says something like, well, you wouldn't sneak up on anybody in that. And actually, you can. We found that like in, live war games and things, that the landscape can mask a lot. And whole squadrons of cavalry can sneak up on you if they're using the landscape. And you'd think heavy cavalry, 15 heavy cavalry would be pretty noisy, but if the wind is blowing a certain way and the landscape is being used correctly, you'd be surprised how sneaky they can be.
So in this clip, you can see me sneak up on an enemy wearing cloth. And you can hear there's not a lot of rustling, and I'm able to stealthily take him out.
Because his equipment is making noise too, so the noise that your own equipment makes can make it harder for you to hear things too, of course. So this is you in ninja mode?
Yeah, that's me wearing my thieves outfit.
Well, clandestine warfare in the Middle Ages was, a serious thing. Whole books have been written about clandestine warfare in the Middle Ages. I keep waiting for the green night vision goggles to get switched on here.
Here I am in my plate and chain, and my stealthy approach to the camp does not go quite as well as previous.
Oh, interesting.
There's just enough noise to alert that guy.
All right.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed this first Toby episode. There'll be links on how you can check out more of his work in the description below. Like the video if you enjoyed. Let us know in the comments section what games, movies, or other experts you'd like to see on EXP. But until next time, thank you for watching, and we will see you very soon.
That's what I call an opener. Show your stuff. Ha! Fuck you. It won't get me.